Focus Forward, I have award-winning author, global workforce innovator, and keynote speaker, Laura Goodrich. Laura, I'm so happy to have you here today. So, first thing, I need to know, how did you take your company global?
Wow, what a great question. I will begin by saying that we had that intention to begin with. We defined that we wanted to be a global organization, and we really didn't know how we were going to go about doing that. We came to the marketplace with a film that was used to kick off and close meetings, and here's the interesting part. We had no idea that it was going to be distributed internationally. We didn't know. But we came to learn that very quickly, and once we did, then we realized that the roads were being paved for us to develop those relationships globally. So we have a distributor of our film here in the States, and then they have a distribution network around the globe. So this gave us the opportunity to collaborate with people around the globe. That was the starting, that was the starting place to sort of open those doors.
Okay, so wait a minute. You said you started out with this concept that you were going to go global. Mm-hmm. When did you start out with that concept that you were going to go global?
We right from the beginning, we said we wanted a global organization. And here, let me tell you.
Like 5 years ago, 10 years ago?
5 years ago.
5 years ago you thought about that. Okay.
5 years ago. But prior to starting this business, I had done a lot of coaching, and the vast majority of it was global. So I had clients all over the world, and I recognized through that experience how much I loved working with leaders worldwide. It gave me a much broader sense of the world, and I really enjoyed that. But what I was going to tell you, Lori, and this is sort of unorthodox, if you will, but where did it all begin, is that I'm an international gourmet cook, and I love food from around the world. So if someone were to say, what do you enjoy more, different cultures, different food, or the people in those cultures, it would be really hard for me to say which one was which. So, I mean, honestly, having a global organization is just who I am. I love different cultures. And so I don't know that it's for everyone, truthfully. I don't know that it's for everyone. But it's a natural place for me. And it began with our film being distributed, and then the book now being translated in many different cultures. So that's another way that we are able to develop collaborative relationships. And then another way, and this is one of those places where people go, really? But unbelievably, Twitter has been a very, very strong place. See, really? You'd want to place that in there. Most would, right? Because we sort of roll our eyes and go, 141 characters, you've got to be kidding. Mm-hmm. But Twitter gave me the opportunity to honestly just pay attention to people from different regions, or if they came to know about our methodology and they would reach out, and then I would, for instance, we have what we call an agent and partner in Brazil. And Volney Faustini has become a very, very close friend of mine. He read the book, loved it, felt that it addressed a very real need in Brazil, reached out to me. We began to, started off by having a couple of direct messages with Twitter. Then I went and looked at his profile on LinkedIn. And we had exchanges back and forth until we began to have Skype conversations. And I recognized that he saw a real connection with the methodology and the Brazilian culture. He was very well connected in Brazil, very established leader himself, and very respected in the university system. And there began a fantastic relationship. Now, he wrote the foreword for the book, and he's been the ongoing communicator with our publishers. And let me tell you, that's a powerful relationship to have, because he understands the methodology, truthfully, better than I do.
Wow.
I mean, he has dug so deeply into it so that when they translate it and he goes through, and there are a couple times where the translations were not what we were intending. And he could help them, make some course correction, which is very, very helpful. So I find those relationships, like with Volney, just really, really gratifying. Which is great fun. So that's kind of how we began the process. And then we set that up so that that's a win-win for him. And one of the things that people often talk about, and I'm sure you've heard them say, is like, well, I want to be careful, like who gets what and how much do they get, and I don't want to share this. And we really have operated very differently. We look at those relationships and we say, how much can we help them make? How much can we help them make? And the bottom line is, if they do well, we're going to do just fine. But we never focus on what we're going to make. And clearly, we're business people. We have this set up. All is going to be fine for us. But then we put together every single resource and every piece of collateral that we can give them so that they can bring our products and services to the marketplace as easily as possible.
So you're not holding anything back.
We're not holding
You're
anything
giving
back.
them what they
We're giving
need
them
to
what they
succeed.
need. And then we just keep asking questions. So like, we need to give them enough information that they can be extraordinarily confident in their conversation and in their, in their communication. And because we have a simple concept with a fairly complex methodology, we've learned that it's really important to share that methodology in bite-sized pieces with clients. So we've created all kinds of collateral for our partners and agents to use in their communication with clients.
Okay, so you have a strong relationship in Brazil.
Yes.
So you don't necessarily have to focus as much on that because that's he's kind of driving that there and taking care of that, and you're providing the resources.
Yes,
Is that right?
Yes, but I think you still have to you really do have to keep that relationship going and constantly. Right. I mean, those agent relationships are an absolute top priority to me. When I begin the week, all I think about is what can I do to help them? How can I, provide them with what they need? And what do I need to do to really keep that fire burning within them to go out there? And so I'm constantly communicating with them. The next step that we're going to move into is setting a format for them to communicate with one another, because each of them have projects and they're learning along. And so I have the conversation and I go, oh my gosh, this is such key learning. And then I try to work my way through. So, along the way, we are establishing how can we share information in a way that everybody gets it.
So when you say everybody, you're talking about your other agents throughout the world?
Yes, and so we have a couple that we have here in the United States, and then we have someone in India, we have someone in Canada. So we are at different regions. We have someone in Russia.
We had talked about the BRIC nations.
Yes.
So we're talking about Brazil, India, Russia, and China.
And so the book is releasing in Brazil and released in Russia around the same time. And so we have someone that we're communicating with, several people that we're communicating with and putting together our strategy for, creating inroads in Russia. We have an agent out of India, and we have some inroads also in China. And it's such a critical thing because, and I think this is really important, the most important thing is not to assume that that region is going to use what you offer in the same way.
Right.
And that's a really important piece. And so when I introduce the content to them, the first question that I ask is, how does this fit in your culture? What does this address in your culture? And I'm here to tell you it's really very different things depending on the culture. I'll give you a couple examples. Brazil, I said, how does our methodology fit? And they said, one, it's fun. And we Brazilians are fun.
Yep.
Two, we are so fun that productivity is always a challenge for us. Right? Yes.
Exactly. Too much socializing.
Right,
exactly.
right. So a fun way to really help them gain productivity, that was really important. And then the third thing is they have an over-dependence on leaders. So employees have an over-dependence on leaders. So those are the three things that Volney was able to share with us. These are very real hurts and opportunities that exist in the Brazilian culture. So there's that example. Now I'll share with you the Russian example. How does this fit into the Russian culture? In our conversations with the Moscow School of Business and our publisher, they tell us very specifically that Russian organizations are not going to do employee development. They do not look at employee development at all. They're well behind the United States in their orientation around employee development. where the opportunity lies in Russia is a young professional. So the young professional between 20 and 40 years of age who really recognizes that they do have the opportunity to get their hands on the wheel and steer their careers in their life. And this is really a relatively new place for them to be in, to have that kind of independence. So they're extremely interested in anything that will help them be more effective and more successful. So we'll focus much more in that way in that particular region.
So do you know about the differences in China?
China is also that independent self-leadership leap, and that really is a leap. So I'll give you an example of an organization that we have been working with, is that they want to double in size in the next 3 years. So that's very robust growth that they want. They also know, due to the competitive nature of their business, that they have to really improve in the customer service. Challenge is that the mindset in China is not self-oriented. It is to be directed by others. And they really want their employees to be able to respond in a moment and in a very innovative and forward-thinking way. So that is a very significant shift in mindset that they seek.
It sure is.
Very significant.
Yes.
And so, that gives you, and because we have a very, again, as I mentioned to you, I think in our previous conversation, Lori, every time we create something and we think it's done, and we engage people in conversations, we are made quickly aware of the fact that we're not done yet, and that we need to put other tools into the mix that help along the way.
Well, if you think about what you're doing, is you're basically adjusting your methodology for each different group around the world.
Yes.
And their specific needs. So when you're looking at that, you're never going to be done.
We'll never be done. We'll never be done. I don't know if you ever saw the movie Outsourced, but it was a movie that was called Outsourced, and then it became a television show. And I think it tanked as a television show. As a movie, it was pretty fascinating. And essentially, this was a company that was going to outsource, and this manager went to India and just came in and said, okay, here's how we're doing things. And it fell flat. It fell very flat, and it was humorous, but it was real. And so, what helps us the most is just, to have a love of these different cultures and a true respect for those cultures. And to do as much research as we can about them, but also to genuinely inquire about the differences. And, so that we know that we can communicate with them as effectively as we can, and so we can work our way around some, misunderstandings, because they can come into play.
Absolutely.
And so it's a really interesting process. I was having a conversation, I think it was with Moscow School of Business yesterday, and some of their representatives. And I can't remember exactly what it was, but the word that they used with me was a very abrupt word in the English language. It was a direct translation that she was breaking. And I knew that there was no offense to be made.
Exactly.
I knew there was no offense to be made, absolutely. And so there comes with that, but with the process, they're very interested. They really do want to know how to speak. The better that they get at speaking English, the better it is for them. So they're really interested in those nuances. Well, here's one of the examples is she was saying the young professionals here are very arrogant. Now, what she meant to say, not arrogant, what she meant to say is that they're very self-directed, and they're very, you know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Very self-directed, and they really want to be successful. So, there's a learning on both sides of the equation. And I always say, as I said to her, please know I always want to communicate with you in a respectful way. If anything ever comes off other than that, please be forthright with me. Don't sort of sit with it. Just let me know that I have stepped across a line, and I am more than willing to learn from you. And I always say that, I'm more than willing to learn from you. And this is interesting because this woman kept saying, oh, you have nothing to learn from me, I have to learn from you. And I said, oh, no. That's not the case
Isn't
at all.
that interesting?
That is not the case. I have a lot to learn from you, and trust me, I'm learning every step of the way. And 30 days ago, the things that I've learned in the last 30 days, it's an ongoing learning experience, and I love that.
Well,
I love
great.
it. So it's
That's
neat.
great because you're in the right place.
Right.
So you were a coach and you coached international leaders?
Yes. So I did a lot of international work when I was coaching. And that gave me a taste of really exploring these different cultures and people from different regions. It also gave me something that I took for granted, and someone brought it up recently, but because I have had so many conversations with people with very strong accents, guess what happened? I get better at understanding people with very strong accents. You put yourself in that place enough. So now I literally have more conversations in the course of a week with people where English is not their first language. So, and I, by hook and by crook, have gotten a lot better at understanding not only different cultures, but also understanding, that communication process.
The meaning.
Which is,
what's the real meaning?
right, and just to understand people. I mean, there's nothing worse than a conversation where you say to yourself, it was to them, what? What? By the time you get to the second what, it's a little bit awkward, right? And so let me give a tip that has been powerfully helpful in communicating with people abroad is Skype. So you're communicating with them. You also have a chat that's at the lower border. So quickly we establish, all right, if I say what once, type the word. And it goes on both sides of the equation. So as we're conversing, if there's even a little silence, that silence where like, they don't know exactly what I'm saying, type it out. And with that written form, then we can very quickly move on, and it allows the communication to be much more fluid. And that's been a very simple and easy tool to ensure that we're on track and that we understand one another. And so I often, throughout the conversation, I will drop in different things that I'm saying that are really important. And they always say that they appreciate that because then they recognize, now that they see it in print, then they really understand it. Sometimes, sometimes they're not understanding it entirely.
Well, that's great. That's really great advice. The next thing I want to ask you is, okay, the home viewer who maybe has a small business, maybe they have a methodology, a book, maybe they have, some resources that go along with that. How could they take their business global? How could they start to do that? You had that thought. You already had, some foothold into traveling and working with people around the world. What if you don't have that? What are the steps that they can take to get there?
Well, I think the point that you bring up, start, is a really critical piece. And a start would be look for a connection in a region that is of interest to you. And that connection might be here in the States, but someone maybe that grew up in that region, or it might be someone living there. But look for a connection, and I always say, at the get-go, you gotta love them. Just really, this is someone that I would absolutely want to connect with and collaborate with, and they're just at the core. It's such an enjoyable communication process. So find someone in that region and find someone that has something to do with your area. And oftentimes, maybe they bring something to the market that's in the ballpark of yours, but yours sort of fits in as a puzzle piece next to what they have.
So a complement.
It's a complement. It's a very synergistic. So you're looking for synergy. Absolutely looking for synergy. So back to the Volney, which is my buddy in Brazil. He is using, he has red cars being one of the methodologies, and then he has two others that he uses primarily in his work. And so he had a void in what he brought to the marketplace in terms of tools that he was using with his large client engagements. When he came upon it, it filled that hole. And that's the kind of thing that you're looking for, is what are they bringing and where is there a hole? Or one of two things, where's there a hole in their offering, or where's there a real need in the market? A real need in the market. And you want to find it's either an opportunity or a pain, and you need to know what that is. And that really you really have to come from a place of curiosity to learn that.
So you have the relationship. If you didn't have this relationship or you didn't find someone here, how would you go about feeling that out to find out what that pain is? what that pain might be.
Oh, I mean, this is where you can do some really, fun things in terms of setting up, Google alerts for, different things that are going on in regions, following news networks, setting up a method. I've got lists on Twitter that keep me abreast to, and I look at these regions, in particular Brazil, Russia, India, and China, and I pay very close attention to kind of what's coming up in the news as it relates to business with these, with these regions. And I really begin my day perusing over those. So I pay close attention to it. I also do searches on YouTube, second search area to Google. Lots of, quick videos that you can take a look at and see, okay, what's going on in this particular area.
So you're a detective.
I'm a detective.
Okay.
Sherlock Holmes, indeed.
Exactly. So you're a detective, and now what you do is you make your relationship, get a relationship
Yes.
with probably a few people within a region through Twitter, and also directly contacting them, I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely.
When you see them in the news or whatever, you directly contact them.
I do directly contact
And
people.
you start to develop a relationship, you follow them, and then what happens?
Well, we start, there's an exchange back and forth, so there's a mutual following. They are looking at what I'm posting and what I'm talking about, and on the other side of the equation. So you do that long enough where you say to yourself, there is synergy here. There is great synergy. And then you might go to a LinkedIn profile, you might look them up on Facebook, and then always do a global Google search and make sure that they're, just kind of see how they're sort of coming up in a global search. You just want to make sure that everything is kosher in that regard, and that gives you a sense of kind of where they're, kind of the realm of things. In fact, I did one recently with someone, and I could see definitely the work that they did, and I also could see that they were involved in the PTA in their child's school. So you get, through all of those different pathways, if you will, you come to understand an individual. When you ultimately are at a place where you might send a message and say, hey, let's have a conversation, let's have a Skype conversation, it is, and if you've done that due diligence, it works, period.
Well, you know a lot about
You
the
know a lot
person.
about the person.
So you have some common values, you
Yes.
share some values there.
Yes.
And you understand kind of what their personal brand is about.
Yes.
Okay, so and you also know that there's some commonalities between both of you. And then what you do is you continue on those.
Absolutely. I mean, imagine this. So you go to, let's say, a coffee, and it's a mixer, and you don't know anyone. So you walk in, and all of a sudden you find yourself in a conversation with someone that likes, Texas cows. And then you can't really get your way out of that conversation, even though there's really no way that you're going to be able to contribute to it in an effective way. But you're stuck. Compare that to what I've given as an example, where you follow them on Twitter, you see what they're talking about, you see their profile on Facebook, you know a little bit about, like you said, their value system, you've been to their website, you know what they bring to the marketplace and how they bring it to the marketplace, you've been to their LinkedIn profile, and you've watched their exchanges. Like on Twitter, I always watch to see that there's a human being behind them, right? I want to see, is there a genuine human being that's exchanging back and forth with people?
Which leads me to the next question. When you're doing the research, you're doing the tweeting, you're doing probably Facebook, LinkedIn,
Right.
You're doing all these things. How do you manage to do all that and deal with, your person in Brazil and your people in Russia and your people in China? How do you deal with all that and actually get any work done? Or is that the work?
Well, with our communication with our agents, I consider that about worth 30% of my time, and that's really what I do, put about 30% of my time in that. In terms of the networks, I've learned how to be very fluid and very efficient in how I can work through them. So I use a Mac, and I bring up my, Twitter is my first, Hootsuite is next, LinkedIn is next, Clout is next, Amazon is next, and very last, I put Facebook. And for me, the reason that is that Facebook, provocative, has not lent to business situations as much as the others have. So I put that in the last place, just to keep myself on track, so that I make sure that I put the right emphasis. I take a look at Twitter, who has communicated with me, and I make sure I get that communication back and forth. I go to Hootsuite to look at the lists. This is how I begin my day. What are the trends going on in some of these regions and in the world? What are the marketplace trends? I go to LinkedIn to see if there's been any interaction, changes with people that I know. I take a look at Amazon to see where book rank is at and see if there's been any modifications or changes there. Take a look at Clout, once again, looking at any changes or modifications there. And I can move through that very fluidly and make sure that I do. So I always, I'll start a timer when I work my way through to make sure that I don't get sort of bogged into it.
Yeah, you can get sucked into social media so easily.
You can.
So, okay, we're going to have to wrap up because of time, but I want to ask you very quickly, what's next for Laura Goodrich?
Well, we will be influencing global more and more, and be communicating and collaborating and linking arms with people around the world for the next, my vision is for the next 20 years. And we'll do that in very innovative ways. I mean, certainly travel, because I want to, as I mentioned to you, I like to eat, so I want to go and, first things first, let's talk about what's really important. I want to do that, but we're connecting and collaborating using technology and doing some really exciting things with telepresence and some of the universities that give this kind of feel as close as you can get virtually. So we are always pushing that, that digital place.
So are you still the face of the business?
Well, my business partner, Greg Stever, is the man behind the lens, and he's an Emmy Award-winning producer. And the reason that everything looks fantastic is because of Greg. And Greg is a phenomenal entrepreneur, very, very bright business mind, would not be here without him.
Are you still the face of the business?
I am still the face of the business.
Okay.
I am the face of the business, but I'll tell you what, this face wouldn't be where it is without that collaboration.
That's fabulous. Okay, so here it is. Seeing Red Cars, Laura Goodrich, fabulous. Get the book, check online. I'm so excited that we got to talk today. I'm really, really happy. So now we have to get together and complete this conversation, because I still have so many more questions.
There we go. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for coming.
Hey, I'm Robert Dempsey here with Tips from the Net. And today I want to take a little different tact and talk about something that you can use for marketing rather than marketing specifically. And what I want to talk about today is mind mapping. Now, mind mapping is a fantastic tool. You can use it for really all sorts of stuff. Basically, you can use it for creating marketing strategies. You can use it to plan out your business model. But basically, it goes like this. A mind map starts in the center with your main topic, the main idea of what you want to talk about. So let's say you're trying to come up with a marketing strategy and you want to mind map this thing out. So you might say literally like, your company name, marketing strategy. And then from there you create branches. So from there you might talk about, okay, create a branch for your active marketing tactics, your passive marketing tactics, your proactive marketing tactics. You might have another branch that discusses who your ideal client is, the methods that you're going to use to go after them, all this kind of stuff. Basically, pretty simple stuff though. It's for not structured, being too structured with it as you might think of an outline, and that's where the key with mind mapping really comes into play, is because it isn't so structured like that, kind of like my discussing it with you here now. But if you're using, say, a mind map to create a strategy, what I like to do and what I suggest is you start again with your, your company name here, marketing strategy. Start listing all of the tactics that you have available, and then create connections of how those tactics can work together. And then once you have that giant mind map, it might look like a spider web kind of thing. Then you can translate that into a plan of action, meaning scheduling when you are going to do what. But really you can use mind mapping for brainstorming, planning out products, planning out services, marketing strategy, all sorts of stuff. Now, a couple of tools that I recommend for it. If you're on the Mac, my tool of choice there is called MindNode. That's mindnode.com. It's great. They have an iPhone application. They have an iPad application too, and they can all sync up. Another one that's actually a free tool is XMind, and that's xmind.net. So that runs on pretty much everything, Windows, Linux, Mac, etc. And that's a free one that you can try out. And then there's a whole bunch of other tools. So all of them have free trials. Download a whole bunch of them. Try them out. Find which one you like the best, but definitely highly recommend mind mapping. So that's it for today. I am Robert Dempsey, and I will see you with our next tip.